is tremendous.
Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Gessing with us tonight. He's the president of the Rio Grande Foundation. You can find him on Twitter at pgessing, P-G-E-S-S-I-N-G, with the @ of course. Before we go to him, I want to tell you that you can find this particular recorded segment tomorrow morning on our TECN TV and the Exceptional Conservative Show YouTube channels, and as well BitChute, BITCHUTE, under Kenneth McClinton. You will be able to find a litany of great information from this interview, because we're watching things at the ground level, and individuals like Paul Gessing and many of the others that you'll find at those sites give that on the ground observation of what's going on that you can't see at 30,000 feet from Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, before we go to Paul Gessing, I want to show you how critical the tyranny is in New Mexico.
The list of businesses that need to close for 2 weeks after 4 or more rapid response visits is growing. In southeast New Mexico, grocery stores in several communities had to close. News 13's Corey King shows us some towns only have one grocery store open now, leading to long lines.
Before they thought, well, the virus, it's not going to affect me. But when it starts to affect their family, now they're starting to understand that it's real.
The New Mexico Health Department shut down 2 grocery stores in Roswell because of too many rapid responses because of COVID-19 exposures. In Carlsbad and Hobbs, they are down to 1 grocery store in each community after the other was closed for 2 weeks by the health department. Residents say this is causing some people to panic.
The governor put in a new edict. I knew things would be crazy, and I'm not crazy, but if everybody else is crazy, then you kind of have to react to that. And so I wanted to go pick up a few things just to make sure that I didn't have to go out this weekend or any other time. And I pulled into the parking lot at Walmart at 6:58, and I did not walk into the store till 8:10.
Michelle Martin said the lines this morning to get into Walmart stretched about a half a mile in Roswell. Now people are saying when the store closes for 2 weeks, it greatly affects families in their communities.
I already had my business closed. We thought we could make it because he has his job, we'll be okay. And now with this happening, we don't know how we're going to make ends meet.
Just to give you an idea how bad the spread is in southeast New Mexico, we looked into the cases from Wednesday. Like Curry County, who reported 89 cases yesterday. 89 cases in Curry County is like having 2,700 cases in a single day in Bernalillo County. In Chaves County, 191 cases would be like having 1,900 cases in Bernalillo County.
You go in, you see 1 or 2 people wearing a mask, and nobody's wearing a mask. So it's like, I don't understand why people are downplaying this virus, because it's serious.
A zip code in Roswell ranked second highest in the state for infections in a single day.
I mean, you have the elderly waiting in line, standing out there. I mean, luckily it was a nice cool morning, but you had people in wheelchairs doing the same thing, or people with their children. And this is the mass hysteria that's being created by this.
Corey King, KRQB News 13.
The Department of Health says it evaluates closures to make sure they won't greatly impact a community, and they try not to close all the grocery stores in a town. They say they try to work with businesses to keep them open.
But the unfortunate thing, ladies and gentlemen, even though good intentions are always wonderful reporting, what isn't reported is the struggle that individuals face in that particular process of not only losing their natural rights, but as well losing their economy. Tonight we have with us Paul Gessing. He's the president of the Rio Grande Foundation in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It is a tremendous honor to have you on the air with us tonight, sir. You have been watching this not only as the leader of one of the most stable conservative organizations in New Mexico, and in America, but as well as a citizen of New Mexico. Tell the American people, is this a legitimate crisis of people having cases, or is this a illegitimate crisis being stimulated by panic from the governor's office?
Well, I hate to be a cop-out, but I would say it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Definitely the virus has spread at greater levels than it had earlier in the year, and New Mexico's been a relatively locked down place since the very beginning of this COVID-19 pandemic. The problem is that when the governor a few weeks ago adopted a new program called Rapid Response, if any workforce had 4 of those within a 2-week period, that means 4 cases of COVID-19 at their place of work, then they would be shut down for 2 weeks. Combined with that, the fact that grocery stores themselves are now only open to 75 people total. So you've got a Sam's Club, a Costco, whatever it is. All you can have is 75 people in that entire facility. That includes workers. So you have extreme limits on the number of people that can go into those stores. And it's creating a real problem. So it's just another example of this one-size-fits-all, governor knows best mentality that has reared its ugly head. Definitely in New Mexico. I know Oregon and Michigan have have problems as well, but especially in rural New Mexico, we've seen stores that have closed, and there are only 1 or 2 grocery stores in the entire town, in the entire region. This is a big state. It's sparsely populated, and it makes it very, very difficult for those people. So the virus is real. It's a real issue, but what's exacerbating the problem and spreading fear is unfortunately the governor's policies at this point.
Now, we constantly hear, and we've had the opportunity of talking with a number of people at the grassroots level, we constantly hear cases, but we don't get the stories that come with false positives, and we don't get the stories that come with the issues of infections versus cases that include asymptomatic people, and we're not hearing of the mortality rate. Are the mortality rates higher now than they were in April in New Mexico?
In terms of relative to the cases that you're seeing, the mortality rate is probably not quite so bad as it was before. But it is still an issue, and the fact is that as the virus spreads, and it's spread at record levels, you're seeing more New Mexicans having issues and dying of this virus than you did back in May and June, when everybody was maybe more concerned, more vigilant about the situation, at least in more places around our country. So New Mexico, like I said, we never really let up in terms of letting people get back to anything resembling a normal life. It was constantly, we're shut down. Now, we're even more shut down than we were before with some of these restrictions on the stores. But in terms of the cases themselves, I think we've come up with better ways to address them, treat people, and really help solve some of the worst problems from COVID-19. But that being said, there are real problems here in New Mexico with a lack of hospital beds and lack of facilities to treat people. So I'm not saying that we should do nothing necessarily in New Mexico, but the governor needs to have a common sense approach, which I don't think she's brought to the table from day one, really.
Exactly. Now, we're constantly hearing lockdown. Virtually the country has been in a perma-freeze since March. And the cases never really went down because of the lockdowns. It just happened in terms of herd immunity, per se. But the more people get out, the more likely they are to become susceptible to the illness, even if you're wearing a mask or not. So, what is the reasoning, the justified reasoning by the governor for locking down New Mexico? And do you agree with it?
The reasoning is very hard to understand. She just has all of this power. She is not only governor, which is a powerful position in general, but because of health orders and laws that were passed actually right after 9/11 here in New Mexico, they gave tremendous empowerment to the governor, whoever that may be. And the governor thinks genuinely that she can stop the spread. At least that's my understanding. But the fact is that no governor, no state, and no country that I've seen has really used public policy to stop the spread. It's either you're an island nation or state and you've been able to avoid it, or you're just not at that moment going to get it for whatever reason. It skirted a lot of our neighboring states early on. Texas and Arizona were late comers in terms of getting the virus here.
Yeah.
It swept through the native reservations very quickly. Navajo reservation is partially in New Mexico, and those folks had real problems. So we hoped that we might avoid the worst of it in New Mexico, but it's gotten much worse since early October. That's when things started to go really bad. But people are wearing masks in New Mexico. Most areas, at least I frequent in the major metropolitan area here, Albuquerque, they're being relatively careful. Folks are taking precautions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the spread isn't going to happen. So I think everybody is wondering how you actually slow or stop the spread at this point. The question is, are people going to be able to get food? And are they going to have to stand in lines? Are they going to be able to find jobs? And we have a high unemployment rate, partially because the COVID-19 lockdown. So those are all questions that we really haven't had answers to at all.
Paul, you are the president of the Rio Grande Foundation, and you are one of the biggest protectors of New Mexico's natural rights. Uh, when you listen to politicians and bureaucrats virtually say that they can save your life by making you wear a mask, uh, how does that make you feel, or as with reason, to that approach? It doesn't seem to be working. Lockdowns, masks, they don't seem to be working, yet they double down on it. And in a very poor state like New Mexico, it has to be quite disadvantageous for individuals to even persevere in the midst of this great storm.
Yeah, it is very difficult for everybody in this state, especially with the poverty issues. And I don't know that there is a silver bullet, so to speak, to solve the virus issues. I think that there's tests that could be in the works and approved by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, that have been reported. You could test yourself virtually every morning. It works a little bit like a pregnancy test where you get a result, but they haven't released that yet to the marketplace. And I would like to see those kinds of things happen. Common sense and focusing on trying to make sure people understand that maybe it's not a good idea to be in an enclosed space really close to other people. That could be something that you rely on a little bit more common sense and don't. In our case, the governor has been very shaming towards the population,
Yes.
and like we're all wayward children that she needs to corral and browbeat into doing what she says. And that's not a good parenting technique. I'm a parent. I don't know about you, but you don't just yell at your kids and say you're horrible, you're doing a terrible job. And then if things are going well, I'm great, we're doing a great job, my strategy's working. So she has this mentality that if it's bad, it's us to blame, and if it's good, she gets all the credit. And the reality is that we do need to consider this a team concept. And another one point is that, you know, we have a large government workforce in New Mexico. A lot of those folks haven't missed a beat financially and professionally
Yes.
due to this, but there's a lot of people out there who are on the margins. I saw a news story from our local media that a food bank had had lines forming at 3 a.m. this morning because so many people are facing so many challenges. So we we aren't really all in this together, especially here in New Mexico, where the government workforce, which is very large, is doing quite well, able to work at home and doing just fine. And those of us who are in the private sector have much more a challenge situation uh, to make ends meet, to do all the things that we all do as individuals, trying to go about and live our lives.
Exactly. Paul Gessing with us tonight. In terms of natural rights, and I want to go back to the fact that you've been here in Washington, D.C. as a lobbyist. You're in New Mexico now. Centralized government, does it work when it comes to health, economics, education? And what practices should be put in place for dealing with either a pandemic or an economic collapse as a result?
Well, believe it or not, we actually had a special session, a 1 day special session of our state legislature to just today. It's the second such session that we've had. Now, unfortunately, we have a governor who's power hungry and sets the
Yes.
agenda, and a Democrat dominated legislature who doesn't want to attack her or attempt to restore, not just natural rights, not just our individual freedoms, but they also uh, they just don't want to be seen as pushing back against her. She's angling for a position with the Biden administration, so she could be coming up your way,
Ah,
maybe as Health and Human Services Secretary. She's definitely one of the folks being mentioned for that position, which would be scary indeed. But you know, as individuals, the first and foremost, sorry, the first thing I would like to have seen, and unfortunately the legislature couldn't get it done today or in the previous special session, is just have some kind of tripwires in place to say, you know, while we may need one person in charge for a short period of time, 2 weeks, up to a month maybe, but we can't have one person rule of any government for 8 months, 9 months, however long we're in this. It's been eight. We could be in this thing for a much longer period of time. You
yeah.
just can't have one person making all of those decisions. So that's just a governance perspective. And then the idea of natural rights and individual liberties. I mean, yeah, I've been fighting for these issues since I moved to Washington in the late '90s and
Yeah.
worked for the National Taxpayers Union up there, and I enjoyed my time tremendously up there. But government does not have the answers, and I think as individual citizens, we need to realize and just take into account that a lot of these government officials are just doing what they do because it's what the other governors did, and there's no original thought, there's no data, there's no analysis. What can I do that seems like it's plausible, that it might work, and that will get the media to kind of go along and not criticize me? Because right now the media is full square in do something mode. They're all running around with their hair on fire and saying, do something, limit your freedom, limit our freedom. Not, let's look at the data, let's look at what's actually effective or not effective. And it's scary when you have all those things combined. There's no doubt about it.
It is. COVID, 99% of the people who get COVID, even in their 70s and above, actually recover from the ailment 3 to 5 days out. The comorbidity patients are more likely to die. In fact, CDC reports 94% of those who had COVID 19 died from comorbidities. So, in this particular reference point, why isn't there a focus on the elderly, those with comorbidities, and those who are at great risk, and allow people who don't have it and who are young to live out their lives. Wouldn't that make a better course of treatment and prevention for COVID super spreading?
It sounds like, that's a better solution in my book for sure. And personally, I'd be happy to, if I go into a store, have my temperature taken, or go into a public building, have that kind of thing done. In New Mexico here, they're attempting to get people to put their name and phone number or email address or personal information into a book. They were doing that for restaurants before they shut the restaurants down. They actually, our restaurants are shut down except for carry out or drive through now in New Mexico. And I'm not sure how common that is in many other states. So, in addition to the grocery stores not being fully functional, the restaurants, you might face a really long line because everybody has to go through a drive-through window. And it's gotten to a point of absurdity. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. We want to have targeted enforcement, targeted realization that it is the 80 and 90-year-olds, it's the people who have a lot of additional illnesses that are really most susceptible. Yes, there's been cases where children have gotten it and suffered and even died, but those are few and far between. It is really the elderly and people who have obesity or breathing issues. They're already present, and those are the ones that need to be extra careful. And I think it shows. And again, the other thing, another thing that's happening is people are here in New Mexico. The gyms, so working out is not available.
Wow.
They've shut down the state parks, and in some areas they've even shut down the playgrounds where kids can play. So now, if you didn't have a comorbidity at the beginning, all of your avenues for working out and physical fitness and just being a healthy person, it's really challenged in the state of New Mexico. And when March rolled around, it was getting towards springtime, and here, we're a pretty warm place in general. We're not Phoenix, but it's nice and warm and sunny here. But now, we're getting into the beginnings of wintertime, and you lose a lot of the sunlight, you lose that vitamin D, you lose the ability to go outside and work out and run around. And man, the depression, the suicide, the kids locked up, not at school, it's just one thing after another. I never thought I would see government take this amount of power in such a short time in my life. And
Exactly.
I've been working in the nonprofit advocacy, trying to fight back against big government for more than half my life now, and it's just unbelievable what we've seen for the last 9 months.
A lot of people are asking, Paul, will the state provide a stimuli for those businesses that they consider non-essential or risk proponents per se?
Well, again, that legislative session, that's what they actually did do, although it wasn't New Mexico tax money. It was some remnants of the CARES Act that still needed to be dispersed and addressed here in New Mexico. So they met today and spent some of that money. But I don't think New Mexico, and I'm not seeing this in other states. I don't know what other states are doing. I haven't seen much effort by the state to do anything. They've pretty much been coming to Washington, D.C. with their hand out and saying, Congress, give us some money, President Trump, give us some money so we can continue. The state government in New Mexico has not been very good at helping provide for its own citizens in any direct fashion. It's all been just money coming through Washington. So our governor is definitely eagerly awaiting Joe Biden potentially giving her and the state of New Mexico and other states a massive stimulus package. But we'll see how that all shakes out in Washington, D.C. And what we're not seeing, though, is the state of New Mexico doing a lot to really help the businesses. And there have been businesses. There are businesses in New Mexico that have been closed since mid-March
Yeah.
this year.
Will you tell Governor Grissom that because we're going to win Georgia for the U.S. Senate seats, that there will not be a stimulus bill to bail out her state? They better get up off their duffs and come up with a better plan. I want to ask you, in finality, about election integrity in New Mexico. The Trump administration has threatened that sometime either towards the end of this week or next week that they will put a legal request for remedy for illegal ballots and also the use of Dominion software. What say you, sir? Was there voting irregularities in New Mexico, and what would be the proper way to remedy those?
I can't say specifically. I don't have the ability to track all of that
Yeah.
myself because we're a small think tank focused on mostly economic issues, but of course COVID has affected our economy like nothing else. But in terms of the election and what happened here in New Mexico, we did have record turnout, and we also have had a history of some issues with regard to ballot integrity and kind of the idea that one person, one vote, and I'm not. I just don't have information saying one way or the other what actually happened. I did think it was interesting that President Trump and his team called out New Mexico earlier on. President Trump was, I know, considering New Mexico a real opportunity for victory in his campaign. And I had heard rumors that he was coming to New Mexico, and then the president came down with COVID, and that definitely impacted his performance here, I think. But the Biden won seemingly in New Mexico by a pretty healthy margin. It's tough for conservatives to compete in New Mexico when you have high turnout. We just have high numbers of kind of the liberal voting blocks, and when those guys turn out, it's tough for conservatives to win statewide races. So we got Yvette Harrell here in the Southern District of New Mexico. She's a good conservative, and she'll be up in Washington for at least 2 years, and we'll see what happens. But I don't know. I would love to see some evidence that there's a problem in New Mexico and have some recounts and more of a discussion about the results. But the whole system, top to bottom, in this state, unfortunately, we've all gone blue. It's all Democrat controlled. So he's going to be fighting a very uphill struggle to get those results and to get the courts and the appeals that he's going to need here in New Mexico.
Paul, how can people who are conservative and Republican support the Rio Grande Foundation from not just New Mexico, but around the country?
Yeah, well, they can find out more about us at riograndefoundation.org. That's all spelled out. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We deal, like I said, overwhelmingly with New Mexico state and local issues. It's a unique niche, but a lot of states do have think tanks like ours, and we try to work with partners in other states to push good policies wherever we can. We actually have a regularly updated blog as well, errorsoфenchantment.com, and I joke with people that I'd like to see that name change someday, but until we get better policy making in Santa Fe and the legislature, we're not changing the name Errors of Enchantment. You talked about my Twitter handle, @pgessing. That's where I do a lot on Twitter, and was picked up by Breitbart News on the grocery issue here in New Mexico. And those are the best ways. You can donate through either of those websites, riograndefoundation.org or errorsofenchantment.com. And we definitely fighting an uphill battle these days in New Mexico. But I don't think the people here are quite as bought into socialism and big government as the recent elections would indicate. 2015, 2016 weren't that long ago. And the governor then tried some good things. She just couldn't get it through that last house of the legislature. So If we just gave conservatives a chance to govern here in this state, I think we might finally see the kind of turnaround that would get this state off the 50th in so many metrics. Education, we're high in crime, all those kinds of things. We just haven't had conservative governance for a very, very long time here in New Mexico.
Well, listen, Paul, we will be calling upon you over the next 2 years because Yvette Harrell needs some help from New Mexico, and so do you, in terms of having a change in public policy. We want to thank you so much for being with us tonight and for giving us an update regarding the grocery situation in New Mexico. God bless you, sir, and happy Thanksgiving to you and yours.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, and stay strong up there in Washington, D.C. Interesting times indeed.
Yeah, they are. Thank you so much, Paul. Paul Gessing, ladies and gentlemen, with the Rio Grande Foundation. He's the president. What a joy to have an opportunity to talk with him tonight on a very difficult subject matter. It's an extensive amount of poverty in New Mexico, and it's rural, so the scarcity is immense. And when you have a double down on lockdowns by, power obsessed, one party, one leader rule, you're going to have some very trying times ahead. And I want you all to know, ladies and gentlemen, that he's right. Governor Grisham is merely a model for what Joe Biden would like to do across the country. Lock down the country for 4 to 6 weeks during the wintertime, even closing some of the grocery stores. It's something that they talked about in Washington, D.C. with Mayor Muriel Bowser in the early part of March of this year. So, ladies and gentlemen, trust me, the rest of leftist America is watching Governor Grisham. And if she's successful with closing grocery stores, you better go ahead and start ordering your toilet paper today. We'll be right back with more of the best in urban conservative talk right after these messages.